Anyone can buy a satellite. You just need loads of money.
Okay, that's a
Rip
straightforward
the
answer.
money off your hands.
Welcome to Rockets and Radars, the show where we chat with successful space and defense founders about their journey to Series A and beyond. I'm your host Martin, and today we are sitting down with Anthony Baker, founder and CEO of SatVu, or SatVu, a company that's literally building the world's orbital thermometer. After spending 30 years in the satellite industry, working with organizations from NATO to working in Qatar, Anthony decided to launch his own startup. He managed to convince investors to put £30 million into his vision of creating satellites that can see heat from space with such high resolution that you can determine what's going on inside buildings. Grab your favorite drink. Anthony's got water, I've got coffee, and join us as we discuss how he went from a seasoned industry executive to a first-time founder, navigating the accelerator landscape, and ultimately launching his first satellite with SpaceX. Enjoy the conversation.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
I'm super excited to have you here. You are one of those I can call legends within the space ecosystem in Europe. When I say SatVu, people know exactly who I'm talking about. So that's amazing. You spent 30 years working in the satellite industry, while working everywhere from NATO to Qatar, and then you decided to have your own satellites that could see heat from space. So let's grab a drink, in my case coffee, in your case water, and let's get into how you convinced investors to put £30 million into what you call the world's orbital thermometer. Before we get into the story from the very beginning, I would love you to give it the mic and ask you a question. What is SatVu in one sentence for people that might not know it?
So SatVu has satellites in space that have a thermal camera, so we can see heat emitting from structures to such a high resolution that you can determine what's going on inside buildings. So we're the activity layer on top of your Google map.
Awesome. That's an amazing answer. Okay, let's get into the story from the very beginning. Before you started at SatVu, you spent, as I mentioned before, 30 years in the satellite industry. Can you quickly walk us through that an amazing experience journey from the very beginning when you got into the industry? Do you even remember how did you get into it in the first place?
Yeah, that comes with age, I guess. No, I don't remember the old stories. Only the good old stories, though. So I took a postgrad degree at Surrey University, MSc in satellite communications, and from there I went into government regulation, looking at spectrum and where you're allowed to fly satellites and that registration through the International Telecommunications Union. So that was where I started. And from there, I went into NATO, looking at satellite communications mainly and optimizing the use of their capacity, helping a little bit on the new programs, solving some real-world interference problems in the NATO area. And from there, I went to Hong Kong for a commercial company. So somewhere in between, I did a executive MBA. So I thought I knew something about business. So I moved out of public sector into private sector. I went to Hong Kong and helped them scale. And then eventually they had a commercial transaction. So an M&A event where SES, which is a famous satellite organization in the world, bought a large part of the company, and that gave it an uplift on the valuation. And from there, I left and went back to the Netherlands, where there was a startup, which was a spin-off from Intelsat. And we built that from, I think I was like employee number 30, so quite late stage. And we built that over the years. That had several transactions of M&A and public listing, and eventually again was bought by SES. So the second time I've been bought by SES.
Good track record.
Yeah, exactly. So third time, maybe they'll be interested in me. I don't know. And in SatVu, who knows? So, and I helped them with some integration of other companies, etc., and kept more on the business development side. with a emphasis on spectrum assets, etc. And from there, I got lured to Qatar, where I came in as COO and immediately became the first CEO, and then worked myself out of a job, handing over as we built the team to nationals. And I think I left as a advisor to the new CEO. So yeah, that was a 5-year journey from zero near enough to 80 odd people and 2 very expensive satellites, and some interesting journeys there. And from there, I came back to London, set up SatVu. So there's
that's an
history.
incredible journey. By the way, before we get further, it looks like you were in the industry already in the academia. I'm just out of the personal curiosity. I'm curious, how did you choose that specific program back in the old days?
Well, I did a first degree in electrical engineering in Birmingham, which was very old-fashioned. We do lots of physics and maths and not touch anything electronic until the very last year. So I was quite disappointed with that, but it gave me some fundamentals. And then I traveled the world for a bit, and then I came back very poor. I knew how to be a student, and there was this government-sponsored program to do MSc in SatComs, and it looked super interesting. I knew how to be a student. The student with money sounded fun, so I did that for a year. It was much harder than I thought. I didn't realize that MSCs, you didn't get any holidays, and it was a lot tougher, but a great experience. And there, they were building their own satellites, and some of the lecturers, Sir Martin Sweeting, wouldn't turn up for his lectures because he's spent all night building a satellite in the lab. And so we got to see what real life was like in the cutting edge of small satellites. And now he's chairman of SSTL, Surrey Satellite Technology Limited, who is building and developing our infrared satellites. So it's gone full circle from being a student to being a founder, CEO, buying satellites from my old professor, in essence.
That's amazing. I know a lot of folks that would love to get into the space industry. Based on your extensive life journey, what would be the advice you would give them in terms of what they should study or what should be their first career step in order to get into the industry and fully integrate themselves?
So I think if you can, my advantage was there were very few satellite degree courses at that time. And so I was lucky to be able to be accepted on that. And it opened up a lot more avenues. So in everything in life, it's just being slightly different from other people. And that qualification helped me open a few doors, got me a few interviews just from curiosity. And then that's all you need. You just need that small break. And then hopefully you're good and hardworking and you progress from there. And I think that's been the philosophy, is move a little bit out of your comfort zone. So when I had a civil servant job in London, my first job, it was very, very comfortable. It was not too pressured, but I wanted something a bit more. So I leapt over to the unknown of NATO and international civil servant, if you like, into an area which I didn't know much about. And I took that risk and it worked. And then from there to jump to Hong Kong back in, 97, that was quite a leap to go all that way with a Hong Kong company. Didn't know very much about the area, very poor communication back home. It was quite a leap, but you got to test yourself all the time. And I think that's helped me well in startup mode as well, is to keep pushing all the time those boundaries.
It looks like every milestone that you had in your life was about trying to get into the next level, be curious about something that you don't know, and just getting into the pond and trying to learn how to experience it. So I like that. Okay, let's get back into Qatar. That was the place where you first thought about creating SatVu. Do you have any highlights or any stories from back then that you would like to share with the founder community?
We were building communication satellites for the Al Jazeera network, was the primary customer. So they had specific designs they wanted. And when that was done, it was, what should a small country be doing in that region? What else can we do? to help that country. And so we started looking at use cases of Earth observation, so you can see over the borders, see where the pollution's coming from. Supply chains are all very important when you're a small nation in such a large area. And so we started looking at Earth observation. I think the interesting stories were looking at ocean plastic. There's a lot of plastic coming in the ocean. So where's it coming from? Where's it going to? And I read a report, I think it was from a French organization, that 80% of plastic comes from 10 rivers in the world. I think 8 of them were in Asia. And that report took 2 years to prepare. So they were going out with small boats and sampling the rivers and then reporting back it got better or worse this week. That seemed it was out of date. That data was out of date. How are you supposed to take action on that data? It's a shocking thing, but you didn't know if it was getting worse or better and where it was going to or the source, etc. So I thought there must be a way from space observation to look at that. So you're looking at the aggregation of plastic rather than a single bottle. And it seemed like if we look at the spectrum of plastic emissions, that infrared would help. What we later discovered is mid-wave infrared might help somewhat, but it depends on what you're trying to do. If you want to know exactly what type of plastic, maybe hyperspectral would be a better place to look, etc. But there was lots of applications. We felt we could make a difference. The challenge was when I did go back and set up the company, it was no one wanted to buy the data. They was very interested in data, and you could get perhaps some grants to do some demonstrations using drones or a plane or whatever, but there wasn't a big market there, and the VCs really didn't like this data for good application because it didn't give them a return. So you need to turn and pivot and work out another way in which we can make money and perhaps provide this data on the long-term basis to the science community to go and do something with. The other thing I noticed from working with Earth observation companies, we invited a lot of them out to Qatar, as you needed to be a sophisticated customer to be able to buy that data. So it wasn't available to end users very well. I mean, Google Earth was just about there. You could look at your house, but you couldn't buy bespoke data. You couldn't buy up-to-date data very easily. And when you try to interact with some of these large organizations, they send you a 50-page contract, and it's like, and the response time wasn't great. It just wasn't that easy. And we tried to take an image of on National Day in Qatar, very proud nation. They wanted to roll out a very large flag on the golf course, and I was asked to go and get an image from space, which sounded fun. Sounded like what a great thing to do. And it was really, really difficult with the contracting, the contention for the image. There was more than one buyer for that image. It wasn't as easy as you would imagine. And so I thought the service level in those days, at least, and the automation, it was all FTP files and no platforms, etc. Both on the commercial side and the technology side, there was room for improvement. And talking to some of the contemporaries in those days, which was, we invited Planet over and Skybox and some of these early optical systems to see what new space was doing in this area. And it seemed like it had a long way to go with a different phenomenology. So
I could totally see that problem back then. And I really love that you got into it anyway, even though the environment wasn't set up to build a company in an easy way, right? What I'm curious about, you have been in the industry for a long time. What led you to become a founder? That was something different you haven't done before. You have been in a CEO role, but not in a founder role. So I'm very curious to hear your thinking back then.
Yeah, I think it was the risks were retired enough, and the ambition's always been there. I do like scaling companies, and going from 0 to 1 was new, but
yeah,
it's just like moving companies. I could have just got another job in another part of the world in another company, but it was that I admit now I underestimated the challenge there, but I just thought you could start it up quite easily. It's easier to register a company in the UK. Regulation's quite good. There was some support networks around. So how hard can it be? So yeah, but there's more. That made me greatly appreciate the other founders I'd worked for and got the company to, even 5 or 10 or maybe 30 people. That first part is a new experience and just as challenging as scaling from that to much larger companies. So what made me do it? It was, I think I could make a difference. I think it's 2 stages in life. You either leave at university and you've got nothing to lose, maybe you've got some experience and you think you can do better, and you go and, sleep with a friend's house or whatever, and you have 0 outgoings and you just put it all in and go for it. But you have very little life lessons. Or I think at my stage of life, it was secure enough to be able to risk a lot. And I had ways with some contracting work, I had to keep some income going, and to explore how you get from 0 to 1 as quickly as possible. And I thought my life lessons would be very useful, but they were very useful for scaling, but not necessarily useful from 0 to 1. So I had to be very humble at times and go, how do you actually do this? Because, we've got a good idea, but it's still not getting the money, the traction and the money and the attention that we deserved. So how do you change that dynamic? And a lot of resilience in the way helps, I think. Yeah.
I would love to now get into the answer on how to do it. So the other founders listening will have it easier than before we recorded this. Okay, let's get into the first 3 years. So based on what we talked about, VCs didn't want to put any money on this, which makes sense based on how the climate was. And also this was a very early tech and early environment to be in as a business, right? What were you doing during those 3 years? You were making your personal money on the consultancy side, right?
Yeah.
Were you putting all of the money into SatVu? Or
what I did was I exposed myself to the customer level. I had a customer experience in Qatar, and I wanted to know where other people had that issue and what was missing in Earth observation. Why wasn't everyone buying it? Because it looked really interesting. And you could see the challenge of looking at Google Earth, and yeah, it's interesting to look at your house and your school and where you work. It didn't add much value. And why was that? So there was definitely a part missing. I looked initially at optical systems, and high revisit seemed to be one thing that was missing. So you could see the pattern of life throughout the day and not a Google Earth once every 3 months, whatever. That's updated. So you could see that, but then there's a lot of the US companies had a start, particularly Planet, Black Sky, Skybox was in those days. They were way ahead, and it was too late with that phenomenology. So we started exploring what else, helping some companies bid Earth observation, particularly in the Middle East, because I had some knowledge of how it worked in the Middle East. That was good experience on selling, on the buyer side, what made things work, what was missing, level of service, all that sort of stuff. And in that time, I met the CTO, Toby, that had experience in turning pixels into meaningful information, was on the buy side as well, I think on the user side anyway. So he knew what was good and what was bad, what he liked and what he didn't. So tackling it from the customer side and the demand side was the major thing. And then discovering some things, a new phenomenology, which perhaps we could bring new insights on, was great. So I think initially we were just looking for heat output from buildings, thinking it might have, how we can save energy and that sort of thing, energy efficiency. Buildings count towards, a large percentage of wasted energy, and that was only increasing. There's a few UN reports, etc. So you can start building a case. That's the problem. Seems to be customers have that problem. They seem to be more valuable to them. And then here's the technical solution, and then you try and optimize from that. So that was sort of the birth of it. So although the company was registered in 2016, we didn't really start until 2020, looking right, this is what we're going to do. It can be scaled. So that means it can be backed by venture capital, and therefore we're on this. You have to embrace that world at that point, both the good things and the bad things of being financed by VCs.
At that year, you got into Seraphim Space Camp, which I can say that started your journey officially. Why did you choose Seraphim Space Camp for that matter? And I'm also curious, how did you get in?
I met Mark Boggarts at the GP there at an event, a space event. So I got myself into the space event. I don't think I actually bought a ticket, but don't tell the organizer. And I just grabbed him and pitched to him. And he was like, oh yeah, that's I've heard of you. Sounds interesting, but they've got a lot of space companies. Constellation sound expensive. And I just kept on going, and I followed up calls, and by the end of the conference, he said, right, drop your application in. The window's closing next week. Have a go, and see where it lands. So it's persistence, luck, making things align. Yeah, it is, and yeah, a lot of persistence on this stuff. And that wasn't the first accelerator. I've been on a few government, half a day, 1 hour pitch sessions.
That was before that.
Yeah. So, but they were. You start to learn what's good and what's bad. And I think Seraphim was much more focused on our business, and I started to learn how you get to the next stage. Is money helps, but the network helps more. So if you want more money, you want to hang around friends that have friends with lots of money. So yeah, it's that if you go piecemeal, it's too slow. You need to go exponential on everything you do. Otherwise, you're not going to get there.
As you have experienced both the bad and the good side of incubators and accelerators, if you would start again now, what would be what would you choose? What accelerator would you choose now? Would it be Seraphim again?
To say yes, so they're one of our lead investors.
Definitely. Okay.
So we get invited to a lot of accelerators. So we're quite picky now because it does take up a lot of management time. So you get a lot back, but you also have to invest quite a lot. And the early ones like Seraphim is weeks. It's quite a few weeks that you're in and out. But at those early stages, you get to understand, and it's the 0 to 1 part. You get to understand what makes a VC tick, and how they like things pitched, and is your operation venturable? So, is it growing fast? Is it addressing a huge market? Do you have some sort of traction? Have you spoken to customers? Is the team good enough? Where's that vision and the energy? All of these things help, and you don't understand that. So quite often, being a technologist, you think, I've got this great widget. Of course, they're going to give me loads of money. We got less technical questions and more about how you're going to operationalize this and scale it is the challenge. They assume that the technology is going to work. If it doesn't, you're going to get filtered out very quickly. But yeah, it's all the other parts which are really important. So picking an accelerator which has experts that can help you a lot at very early stage and be quite critical is important. So if we were an energy company, had some, we would go to an energy accelerator. I think that's you need to pick.
Doesn't make sense.
Yeah. It's a generalist unless they're very big. Y Combinator's got a great reputation, has its own unique impact if you can get onto that. So go big, I think. Go big, go specialized on what you need to show some difference at each stage. And so whatever it is, maximize it.
Would you choose the accelerator based on geography, or do you think that geography doesn't matter? You just mentioned Y Combinator, which is on the other part of the pond. So I guess, yeah, okay, so geography doesn't matter. What matters is that choosing the best program that is tied to you.
So we were fortunate that we were on the first AWS Amazon Space Accelerator. They did a space accelerator, and we were on that. And because it was after COVID, there was more acceptance of working remotely, and everyone did. Yeah. But a lot of them, we even some pitch events, we were asked to fly over, and it was really difficult flying to California for a week as a startup with no money, trying to pitch for, 500K. It's a big investment, really, and the hit rate is pretty low. So we loved the remote part because it was very leveling for European companies to be able to now have pitch to investors, go to conferences, go to accelerators on a more level playing field than previously. So that was a good outcome for us. So AWS was a great one as well. They had very big customer base. They helped us a lot with our platform, what to do and what not to do. So yeah, that was much more the second stage.
Mm.
But the biggest learning experience was from Seraphim at the very beginning of understanding what makes VCs tick.
And in Seraphim, you were named as the best performer of the batch. Why do you think you became the best one?
We just tried our best. We were very keen. So at that stage, there were 3 of us. And I think we were 30, 40, 50 age, I guess. So quite a mixed age, but quite mature in some respects. And so we had to make this work. I mean, we all had, I think, young families, etc. We had dependents. It's not so much a gamble; it's a really calculated gamble. So we expected to win, expected to succeed.
I like that.
You've got to go in with that mindset. There was no way everything could fail, but it wasn't going to, because we were going to have all the bases covered. And we were going to learn as much as possible. This is that will to succeed, I think.
Once you became an alumni of Seraphim Space Camp, what happened afterwards?
So it was interesting that at that time, it wasn't automatic because the Seraphim would invest in you. So the first thing they did with us was go and find your first investment, then we'll see if we'll follow. It's like, oh, we thought you were going to,
Yeah.
It was money straight away. And now you tell me we were the best of the bunch. It's like, why didn't they give us money straight away? So yeah, it was quite hard. So we were set on the road and to go and find and then COVID. We were in the middle of COVID at the time, so it was very hard. American investors were like, we can't shake your hand anymore, so we're not going to invest, and we don't know how bad this epidemic's going to be, so we're not investing. So it was quite tough that first year. So where we turned to in the summer after the space camp was grant writing, and we got really good at grant writing, and we started winning them. And we won this grant from the UK Space Agency that you had to co-fund it. I think it was only like 50 or 70% funded, and we needed the rest of the money. So then we went back to Seraphim and said, look, we've won £1 million of grant. We need the other half, or the other third. And so now are you interested? And they said, yeah, okay, this sounds a bit more interesting. Non-dilutive equity, the risk is being shared. So how far have you got with the product? And we said, look, we got a test camera, and we could put it on a plane and fly it up and down and show you what the great things thermal can do. So if we see the first image out of that camera, that's a proof point. Go and find some more customer references. Go and win this grant, and then we'll look at investing. So that at that time we did get an angel funding at the early stage, so we could afford to fly a plane and collect some data. Then Seraphim came in, and then you get the power of a VC like that, opening up the network, helping you reach out, and getting those referrals to other VCs is very, very powerful, rather than just trying to get people on LinkedIn, etc. So
okay. It looks like you spend a lot of time and energy on getting grants, as you mentioned, as well as angel investment. Do you have any highlights or advice for founders that might be at the specific stage right now? What would be your advice on either getting grants or angel investors?
So we always looked ahead. So you want this investment round because it will get you to a certain point. And that point means you'd be eligible for more money. And typically the runway is between 12 and 24 months. And so you have to hit it in that time frame. So what can you do now that will ensure that you get to your 24-month runway and that you'll achieve something which is then reinvestable? And how much money do you need now to get to that point? And so it's identifying those proof points, identifying what that inflection point is for growth, and it can be like reducing risk. Do a proof of concept of technology such that you show that in principle it works. We just need to refine it. We need more money to refine it. Talk to customers. If I could do this, and here's a mock-up, would this be valuable to you? Does it solve this problem? We think you have. Starting engaging and get a LOI or something. Grants are good because it's non-dilutive, but there's also, if you go in space industry, if you go to the European Space Agency or one of the UK Space Agency, it's a seal of approval that you're grown up enough to fill in a grant and the government trusts you that you'll finish it, etc. So you're starting to show a level of maturity in the way you conduct business, because typically grants are quite well monitored, so you need some structure. You don't just get a pile of money and that's it. So it's all those reinforcing points that you need to come up with.
Awesome. Okay, so in the next milestone of your journey, you got the Seraphim on board, which was your first seed round.
Also, we did it in 2 closings, so they gave us the money up front so we could win the grant and get on with the work. And then we sort of had a second closing of that round to have other people come in and help us out. And then that was oversubscribed and we had some convertible notes.
Tell me more about how did you approach the pitching? Your expertise was in the late stages. So I'm very curious, how did you approach the early stage?
So I think we learned a lot of lessons from the accelerator, because it was pitch acceleration, pitch coaching as well, and getting them messaging and being a bigger, stable management team. So with seed, it was, what do you need to get to a proper proof of concept, de-risking the technology again, getting things going, shortening the time frame. So the more money you want, the more it has to deliver something within a reasonable time frame. So if you can deliver within those 24 months, a satellite or a prototype or a camera or something that de-risks it, then people will give you more money to get it into space, or whatever your next step is, or launch commercial service, or scale from there. That's the important thing, is to pitch to where you want to be and what that will then open up from there.
When you got that seed round, how much of a product have you had back then?
So the initial grant we won did a feasibility on the camera. So we started building that camera, getting some early items on there. We did the seed funding paid for plane, and we put a replica camera on the plane and started flying up and down so that we could try and address use cases. And that was overly successful. So we started finding this can be used for so much stuff. So then we started having hundreds of applications and use cases, and that became a problem in itself. It's like the investors typically want you to do one thing well. And now I remember we had an Excel spreadsheet. It's like, you can do all this stuff with it, and here's the pros and cons. And it was overwhelming. And we were trying to narrow and focus on what the winning application was. And it was really difficult because lots of them seemed to be expanding. And even in those days, we used to get quite a lot of inbound inquiries. So we were quite vocal about what we thought we could do with it. And we got a lot of inbound inquiries, which helped with investors. So when you look at our cap table, it's both defense and climate, and built environment and energy transition, and space specialists. And so that becomes, each of them has a network both of customers, portfolio companies, and other investors. And so it becomes very much a multiplying effect.
When you mentioned the vast options of applications of the technology, what was your approach of choosing thermal imagery? I believe that was the application that you chose. Why that?
It was, so not many other people were working in that space, and most of them were looking at a low resolution applications, which could address niche, but maybe large markets, but you had to win against traditional sources of data. So, agriculture, massive markets, but there's a lot of solutions there, from drones on farms and other monitoring. So you needed to find out where you could add value in that market. And there's free data coming from space agencies. So it was and there was players already in that market. So we needed to find something which was quite differentiated. So high resolution, high revisit, because the latency thing I learned from the planets of the world, etc., was going to be important. Looking at the pattern of life throughout the day, not just once a week or whatever, was very powerful. And what applications that could unlock was, they're not only multitude, but they all seem to be high value. The players in there seem to have a large disposable income. The market could grow a lot, and the TAMs could possibly be quite large. So that made us more venturable. It made us more optimistic that we would find the winning application there. So what do? We started putting out standardized imagery and doing catalogs of the stuff we were collecting from aircraft, building a basic platform so people could log on and download the data, etc. And that seemed to be super successful. So we didn't need to address the end user. We just needed to give everybody a good standard product and start elevating the insights in that. So where we are now, we have raw imagery, which sophisticated users can use. We have a product which helps people understand what's going on inside the image, so they can create a time series or activity around a structure. We've got a whole catalog of data which we can then derive other insights at a later date. So that addresses every market. Then the challenge is, who's the right partner to address solar farms? Who's the right partner to address energy efficiency, urban heat islands, pollution, etc.? So then we're leveraging on a regional basis, on a global basis, our basic data, and we can then let other people determine what's the most successful application, and we'll keep a close eye on that.
And how did you prioritize who to talk to? In the very beginning, it might be overwhelming, as you mentioned, right? There are so many applications, both on verticals and horizontals. How do you prioritize?
You guess. So again, it's not obvious how you get contact to those buyers. So you get yourself into, we've never really gone to space conferences. We've always gone to customer conferences. So we went to built environment conferences. The investors invited us to award ceremonies, and you just get your name out there and you start pitching to people that build houses. We thought we'd be really useful in the construction industry. We went to a couple of conferences. We held a workshop in a university in North England, and it turned out to be really negative. So yes, building buildings is really important, and keeping an eye on the energy efficiency of them was really important. But builders do exactly what they're contracted to do. They could look after their own carbon footprint on the machinery, but we were going in at the wrong level. We needed to go to the architects, the funders of that project. They're the ones that needed our data, not the construction workers. And so it was like, oh my God, what a revelation. Don't go down this avenue, go down a different avenue. So who's funding this rather than who's building it? So that was we've had a really tough time in the built environment, because there's a lot of noisy signals in a city. We can see small houses, but they're better than anyone else, but they are very small, and there's lots of other influences around that. So we found a better case in directing higher resolution imagery, maybe on a car or possibly a drone. Go and look at this street, go and look at this, rather than us making a determination that that house across the road needs new windows, which is the real actionable insight. But we're looking at a macro area and trying to direct the climate dollars into the right place. And that's a recurring theme. We feel that we're an enabler of the whole globe, that we can direct people to the biggest problems that might have the biggest impact on a climate basis.
I really like the way how you think. When you said in the beginning by guessing, I was like a bit skeptical, but now it totally makes sense. I really like that. Okay, cool. Let's talk more about the Series A. So we tapped into a bit, but just to highlight is that between the seed round and the Series A, there were just a few months. It was a rapid, fast time. Have you raised your Series A? I'm very curious about how you think on why did you raise so fast? Was it because you were started to gain traction and you just took the opportunity? Or was there any other thought process behind that?
The seed rounds can only be a certain size for both the dilution point of view, deployment of the capital, etc., use of proceeds. The dates are a bit confusing because the seed took longer than we had the first investment from Seraphim, and then we had the second close, which is the one we announced. So it was starting work and started spending the money and the grant money before we closed the seed. And then 5 million only gets you the camera, right? So, and some staff and whatever. We needed the satellite. So once we showed a path to retiring the risk on the camera, give us the rest of the money so we can build the satellite.
Like that, purely other than need. Okay, if we compare seed and Series A, apart from the dilution and the limit, the top cap that you can actually get on that round, would you have any specific advice that you can now think of for the founders that are right now in seed and are approaching Series A?
So I think it's pretty tough at the moment. So I think there's quite a lot of investment, it seems, around seed. There's smaller checks. People are willing to bet on a new technology. And at the other end, if you've got revenues and you just need scaling, there's money available there. It's quite a tough gap, being you need money for a proof of concept or launching your first satellite. In our case, launching that first product is tough because you need big money. It's going to take you a while to deliver, and so there's inherent risks there. So unless you've had successes like us with interim satellites, and we're just a few months away from launch now, so people can buy into that risk. But if you've got a long time frame for development, anything in deep tech is going to be really, really tough in that interim stage. So what's the advice? Try and differentiate yourself from everybody else. So get slightly more customer traction, do a better proof of concept, do more market studies, don't spend too much money. You have to extend that runway as much as you can, because that's what kills you when you run out of money, not out of good ideas, out of money. So you got to stay alive and be disciplined in that. So we actually plan now not for a two-year runway. We plan for cash break even. So we assume we're going to be successful, launch the satellite. We got enough pent-up demand for customers such that if a good percentage of them come in, we will not need any more money. That would be a very slow growth path because we don't want to wait until we break even but it assures the company doesn't go bankrupt. And on that prudent basis, we hope people will give us more money because we never have to raise money. We can always survive on where we are now. And so if there's economic turmoil around, we still live. Things might go a little bit slower than we want, but we're not going to die and run out of money.
Before we get into launches, I want to talk about the first satellite contract. You got that in December 2021. So the simple question will be, how did you get it?
Anyone can buy a satellite. You just need loads of money.
Okay, that's a
That's
straightforward
the money off your hands. But how did we persuade them to building without the full, do part of it without having the whole of it? So I think it's credibility as well. So this did come with age. I've known SSTL from when I was a student, and I've interacted with them a lot over the years. And funny enough, I never bought a satellite of them because I didn't think they were developed enough for the type of satellite that I was wanting. So they're very specialized in low Earth orbits, small satellites, and I always wanted a big satellite in geostationary. So it was completely different. But we'd had this rapport for a long time. They knew me, I knew them. So yeah, I think part of it's
knowing them. Network again, right?
We convinced them we were going to be successful and that they should work with us, and it wasn't a waste of their time. There's a high probability that we were going to succeed. And they'd been burned before by other companies, and so we're quite cautious. So yeah, it wasn't easy, but there's a mutual benefit there.
Okay, let's get into the first launch of HotSat-1. I like the name. That you launched with SpaceX in June 2023. Can you tell us more highlights here? How did you feel? How was the launch day? Take us there. Take us back there.
Yeah, so with everything with satellites, there's delays, there's challenges. Even on the launch week, the launch got shifted a few days. So we're out there with some team members. So the two co-founders, so Toby and I went, and then we had a little competition at work. Who else could go, and we would pay for their ticket, etc. So that was fun. Yeah. So there was a big build-up. We have a clock in the office that counts down to launch date.
Nice.
So yeah, just all these things that celebrating milestones when it leaves the factory, when it gets integrated, the photographs that come out. Yeah, it's a super exciting time. I've been to a couple of launches before, and they are always terrifying. When it launches and it passes the tower, everyone's relieved that it didn't blow up on launch. So that's great. And in over my career, there's been quite a lot that didn't get that far. So that was an achievement. And then when it separates from the rocket, when the satellite separates, everyone's cheering and clapping. But it's mainly the launch providers that are doing that. They've done their job.
Now it's your turn.
Launch. They've got their money. They've done their bit. Right, on to the next customer. But you're wondering, did it survive to launch? So the first signal, the first contact there, and then maybe a couple of weeks later, the first image, they're much more, it's such a relief at that point. In fact, I saw the launch. I knew we wouldn't get anything confirmed after first signal for 2 weeks. So I went on holiday. So whether it's failed or succeeded, I may as well go on holiday, and we'll figure out in 2 weeks whether it has failed or succeeded. And then we'll go from there. But, because in either scenario, I'm going to be super busy. If it's failed, we need a replacement. If it succeeded, all the customers are going to want it, and there's lots to do. So I went on holiday. So yeah, it was a super, super exciting time. I think the team were really relieved. And then when the first image came on, it was much better than we anticipated. And so there was super excitement. It's actually a video camera. We take 25 frames a second, and you can get so much more out of stacking those images. So it's pretty much like your iPhone, small camera compared with the old SLR. We got pretty much the same technology on board. And so all those algorithms that make your iPhone beautiful, we're the first company to do this in high resolution infrared. And there's so many different algorithms you can do. And if you look to compare the images we're producing today compared with the one we showed the first image, it's just streets ahead now on the clarity, the scientific accuracy, the resolution to a certain extent, but certainly on the geostationary georeferencing accuracy is very much better.
If we get later into the timeline, December 2023, you had actually a camera anomaly, right? Did I get that right? Right. How did you handle it? And how did investors react at this point, if you remember?
So, yeah, the camera stopped taking images, which is sort of quite catastrophic. The platform still works, and we've made the best of that. But yeah, how did it go down? So, those investors that had invested in space, like Seraphim, and Lockheed Martin, and Stellar Solutions as a consultant into the space realm, they understood. It's like things happen. As long as you get to the bottom of it, get on and build the next one. I think some of the more climate guys, they knew it was possible, but it was quite a shock that this risk emerged. And so it was, there was a lot of discussion about it. We had put ourselves we're not prepared for the worst, but we were ready for the worst. So we had insurance in place. We had a lot of customer support. So they were like, we love the data we've seen to date. We're with you. Tell us when you're back online. The same reaction from the staff. And we got some quite junior staff, a lot of data analytics people. They had not seen, didn't know this could occur. So it was quite a shock to them. But we also had members of staff that had seen this. And so sharing those stories about how you get through this, it's not unusual. And then by sort of February, we got agreement from the shareholders, the existing shareholders, that they put some more money in. So doubling down, get the second satellite under construction very, very quickly. And so we had a good recovery story at that point. And from there, it's just, it's been building on that foundation.
And I would love to now get into the future. So what's next for you from now on? Where are you going?
So we're still raising a little bit more money for HotSat 2 and 3 to be completely funded and up to speed. You can always do with a bit more money. We'd like to order some more parts for the follow-on satellites. So we're planning HotSat 4 and 5, and deploying, as we always said, to aiming towards 9 satellites. So we're pretty clear from the investors what milestones we need to hit on revenues, etc. And so that's scaling the constellation. Then looking at the applications, developing our platform is spent a year on it now. It's probably one of the best ones you're going to see. I mean, the customers seem to be really intrigued and interested in what we've achieved in a year. So it's a great platform for delivering both through API and a GUI. And so working with customers who are maybe not so familiar with Earth observation and showing them the power of our data, especially in combination with other data, is the really interesting part. So we're opening up new markets beyond the traditional Earth observation market.
You are one of the few space founders that are highlighting, talking with the non-space people, non-space customers. And I really like that, how you are putting it together. Awesome. Amazing journey. Now let's get into quick fire round questions. How does it work? I will ask you a few questions, and if you can answer by 1 or 2 answers, that would be awesome. I'm very curious, what do you think? What is the most surprising customer use case of SatVu?
So there's been a lot of them. I never knew that we could see solar panel failures from space and that would be meaningful to people. So I always assumed that a solar farm, they knew exactly where things failed and they knew the yields. And now from space, you can help those guys who don't know that information manage their solar farm much more efficiently, saving energy, etc. So that is amazing.
Awesome. Next one. How do you explain SatVu to your family?
So our family is very climate orientated. So it's, we're going to save the world by looking at where we're wasting energy.
I like that. Okay. And the last one. If you were starting again today, what would you do differently?
I try to go even faster with, yeah.
You went pretty fast, but fair enough. That's a good answer.
No, we can go fast.
Awesome. Super. Thanks so much. This journey was incredible in the scale, but also very exciting. Do you have any few last thoughts for the listeners?
Yeah, you have to believe in what you're doing and put 110% in, but also listen to the feedback. So someone told me if 3 people tell you that your pitch is not good for this reason, they're probably right, and you have to follow your pride and listen to them and change. So we pivoted from plastic to pollution and activity, and it made a big difference. We will come back to plastic.
Okay, awesome. Thanks so much. And that wraps up our conversation with Anthony Baker from SatVu. What really stands out is his emphasis on persistence, adaptability, and the importance of focusing on non-space customers to build a successful space business. His key advice for founders: move fast, believe in what you are doing, but also be willing to listen and pivot when necessary. As he put it, if 3 people tell you that your pitch is not good, for this reason, they are probably right. If you are an early stage founder in the space or defense sector, I hope you found value in Anthony's journey from industry veteran to successful startup founder. Don't forget to subscribe to Rockets and Radars for more conversations like this with founders who are pushing the boundaries of what's possible in space tech and defense tech. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next week with another amazing guest from either space or defense. See you next week.